Hey guys, so for this video I am going to be recording without my face just because there's a lot going on some of these slides and I don't want to block anything. So you're free from that for this one. What we're going to be talking about this lesson are the biomes. These should be a familiar topic from middle school, but we're going to go into them in more detail because you need to understand them at a more distinct level. So, what are biomes, first off? And what are requirements of a biome? Well, biomes are a group of similar ecosystems with similarities in it, such as similar abiotic factors, such as temperature, climate, things like that, similar producers, and other biotic factors or living things. We have two categories of biomes. We have terrestrial biomes, which are all the land biomes that you're familiar with, and aquatic biomes. Now, in this lesson, we're going to be focusing on terrestrial biomes, and then afterwards you're going to be watching an ed puzzle on aquatic biomes and answering some questions on terrestrial biomes. So for now, we're going to focus on terrestrial. So terrestrial biomes are classified mainly according to temperature and moisture. The closer to the equator you are, the higher the temp and the higher the moisture, therefore the higher the biodiversity. The only exception to that is altitude. For instance, in specific mountain ranges close to the equator, at the very base of the mountains you will find a tropical rainforest, but at very high locations you're going to find snow. Now there are 7 major terrestrial biomes: the taiga, the tundra, the temperate grasslands, tropical grasslands, the temperate deciduous forest, the desert, and the tropical rainforest, and we're going to look at each one of these. We're going to start with the tundra. This is the lowest biodiversity of them all. We're basically going to be working our way from the endpoints of the Earth towards the center in terms of biomes as we go over this. So this is usually the furthest from the equator, lowest biodiversity due to cold temps and low moisture. They get less than 50 centimeters of rain per year. You only have 2 seasons. It's very cold. You get lichen, moss, and shrubs. The ground is permanently frozen. It's called permafrost, and plants can only grow in that layer that's active between melting and freezing. Despite the fact you have very minimal plants, you have very large animals, a lot of large mammals, caribou, Arctic fox, polar bears, seals. You get some birds and some insects, but it's mostly large mammals. Next down is the taiga, or, as we also know it, the coniferous forest. This gets much more rain, despite it being still very cold. This also has a wet and dry season, or a summer and winter season, as it were. This is primarily characterized by lots of coniferous trees, or conifers, so cedar, spruce, pine, firs, and lots of moss and lichen. So biodiversity here is also low due to cold temperatures and low moisture. You're going to find, again, a lot of large mammals. Moose, bear, raccoon, mink, rabbit. You're going to find some insects and birds. One of the biggest differences between the two is because it has more moisture, you're going to see a lot more forest and a lot more swamp. Because of the cool temps, you're going to have very slow evaporation and decomp, so it's going to be very swampy. It's also the largest biome. Think of countries that are found in the biome. Canada, Alaska, as one of our states that's found in it. Russia is a huge country and it's mostly taiga. Fun fact, my father-in-law was hiking in the taiga a few years back and got stuck in one of those bogs and had to be pulled out. Next one is the one we all know and love. It is our biome, the temperate deciduous forest. This gets a decent amount of rainfall, and the temperatures fluctuate at such a rate that we have all 4 seasons. The plant life in this biome are beeches, maples, oaks, hickories, ferns, mosses, shrubs. Those are the things you're going to see. You're going to see a very high biodiversity here. Because of the temperatures, because of the increased moisture, you're going to see a variety of insects, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. One way you can always tell that we're talking about this biome is that the trees lose their leaves when it gets colder out towards autumn. Next on the list, before we go any further, we need to make sure you remember the difference between deciduous and coniferous trees. Deciduous are trees that are found in temperate deciduous forest. They're the ones that lose their leaves. Coniferous trees are found heavily in the taiga, but can also be found in the deciduous forests. Their leaves are needle-like and they produce cones. So you need to remember the difference between a conifer and a deciduous tree. So next on our list is the temperate grasslands. We actually have 2 grasslands we're covering. This is the temperate one. So this one has okay rain. It doesn't have great rain. It runs at about 25 to 75 centimeters per year. Nice mild temperatures. You're going to see 4 seasons here. Lots of grass, no trees. And the only reason you're going to see such a decent amount of medium-high biodiversity here is because there's a lot of good soil. This is where we make all of our crops. If you think of the breadbasket, any place where we have tons and tons of crops in the US or surrounding countries, it's because we're growing these crops in the temperate grasslands. There's not a ton of rain, but the soil is very rich. Therefore, you get really good food from this. You're going to find a lot of small animals in a temperate grassland. So prairie dogs, rabbits, coyotes, a couple of larger ones, bison, but mostly small amphibians, small reptiles, small insects, small mammals. Next up is the tropical grassland. This gets a ton of rain, anywhere from 100 to 150 centimeters per year, and it stays relatively the same temperature all year round. 2 seasons in this biome, wet and dry. Despite the fact it is a relatively high temperature and has tons of rainfall, the soil sucks. So if you want to remember a difference between temperate and tropical grasslands despite the temperature, tropical grasslands have terrible soil, temperate have good soil. Because this poor soil, you're not going to get a lot of variety of life. Tropical grasslands are actually less biodiverse than the temperate grasslands. You're going to have lots of grasses with some scattered clumps of trees. You're going to have, again, large mammals. You're going to have some insects, reptiles, birds, a lot of large animals, zebras, giraffes, antelopes. Another name for this would be the savanna, of course. And as I reminded you before, poor soil. Next up is the desert. This gets very, very minimal rainfall, and the temperature varies depending on which type of desert. Yes, you can have a hot or a cold desert. Some have seasons, some do not. Deserts have incredibly low biodiversity due to extreme temperatures and very low moisture. Even in a hot desert, too, temperatures can drop to below freezing overnight. So there is a lot of extreme temperature changes, very little moisture. It's not very good for a very rich variety of life. You're going to get a lot of succulents, which are plants that can hold on to water very well. They have very waxy coatings, such as cacti and aloe, sagebrush, mesquite, tumbleweed. You're going to see a lot of small animals, insects, reptiles, birds, and rodents. Because of these extreme temperature fluctuations, you're not going to see much life beyond that. And plants are not going to be very deep down in the soil. They're actually going to have very shallow roots. When it does rain, plants are going to flower and spread very quickly over the surface of the sand and then disappear after that. Last but not least is our tropical rainforest. This gets the most rain per year, up to 660 centimeters per year, which is a ton of rain. This stays generally 20 to 34 degrees Celsius all year round. There's no seasons. It's always tropical, rainy rainforest. This has incredibly high biodiversity for the obvious reasons. There's tons of moisture and it's nice and hot. So this causes a ton of producers. Lots of tall flowering plants, big evergreen trees, vines, but you're not going to find very many plants on the forest floor. You're going to find a high variety of life as well, just like our temperate deciduous forest, the tropical rainforest, has a high biodiversity. Lots of varieties of insects, reptiles, amphibians, birds, monkeys, sloths, tigers, you name it. The downside is the soil is horrible. So the only reason there's such a rich sort of biodiversity is because of this wonderful amount of rain and temperature. Because the soil sucks. The roots aren't going to go very deep either because of that. There's a lot of precipitation every day, even in fact, that makes up for that. But those are some of the main basic biomes. I'm going to talk a minute or two about aquatic biomes before I stop, just to give you an idea of what determines an aquatic biome, and then you guys are going to watch the Ed puzzle on aquatic biomes and do the little mini quiz on biomes on Moodle. So, aquatic biomes are classified based on three main things: oxygen, nutrients, and sunlight. So an aquatic biome is determined by how much oxygen is in the water, how much nutrients is in the water, and how much sunlight there is. Nutrients will enter a water system through a couple of different ways. They'll either run off from the banks of surrounding lands into the water, or it will be added from the actual things that live in the water themselves. The higher concentration of nutrients is dependent on how deep in the water you are. So the further down you are in the water, the higher concentration of nutrients is. And that's because as things run off into the water and as things live and die in the water, all of that organic matter sinks to the bottom. Now, oxygen does the opposite. The closer you are to the surface, the higher levels of oxygen, and that's because you are closer to that surface level of air. It also, as I stated, depends on the amount of sunlight. Water or different aquatic biomes have two main zones depending on sunlight. The top zone is called the photic zone. This is the areas where the sunlight can reach. You're going to have a lot of photosynthesizing producers in this level, like algae and phytoplankton. And then below that, you're going to have the aphotic zone. This is areas where sunlight can't penetrate or reach. So any producers that live in this level, such as tube worms, are going to rely on chemosynthesis, thereby taking the chemicals from the surrounding water and surrounding materials and turning that into food instead. All right, you're going to be learning more, as I stated, on aquatic biomes in the Amoeba Sisters Ed puzzle, and then doing the little Moodle activity where you're trying to figure out where Waldo is in the world by matching his description of his travels to a biome you've learned about. All right, signing off.